In this lesson, we're going to discuss the game camera. You may have noticed that when you place your initial spline point in the Pro Editor, you get a few icons that didn't appear in the Light Editor. Two of those icons have to do with the game camera, so let's start there. The first thing we'll look at is the blue camera-shaped object that in fact represents your default game camera. We can select this like any other object and open its properties menu by hitting up on the D-pad. FOV, or field of view, is the first option, and it determines how wide the view of the camera is. To some extent, this setting simulates the lens on a camera. A low number is like a telephoto lens, where objects appear bigger, but you can see less of the world around them. As you move up, the lens gets wider, objects appear smaller, but you can see much more of the surrounding environment. Next we have Move Camera. You can of course move the camera around in the editor just like any other object, but using this option is nice because it gives you a real-time idea of what your camera view will look like. Hit A to enter move mode, then use the analog sticks to adjust your camera's position and the left and right triggers to rotate. Once you like the camera position, hit A again to place it and be returned to the camera's properties menu. This brings us to another sub-menu, Advanced Camera Settings. In here, we have a number of options to further manipulate how the camera works. Let's run down the list. Assisted. This setting takes in more parameters than simply the camera target's location when it is in motion. It will look at the target object's velocity and the path ahead to try and give the player the optimal view as they play. Follow determines what the camera follows. By default, the camera is set to follow the game character. You can also choose to have the camera follow a different object if you like. Move the follow slider over to object, then use the select follow object option that pops up to select any item in the game world. Now that object is what your game camera will follow. Position behavior determines how the camera reacts to its relative object as that object moves through the track. This is easiest to explain with some visual aids. For this example, the curved line represents the driving line, the circle represents the camera target, and the box with the arrow coming out represents the camera. The default behavior is driving line. With this setting, the camera takes into account the relative object's horizontal rotation. Glue to target reacts similar to driving line, but also takes into account the target object's vertical rotation as well. Key position does not take into account the target object's rotation, so the camera will always stay in the same angle it is at the start. Set to static, our last behavior option, the camera will rotate to follow the target but will not move from its starting position. Position interpolation determines how quickly the camera adjusts to a moving target. A low number and the camera is slow to adjust and will fall a bit behind a fast-moving target. A high number is quick to adjust and will keep its relative position to its target. Target behavior uses one of the other new icons we have in the Pro Editor, this target that appears in front of the rider. This is the point that the camera is fixed on, and adjusting its behavior determines how it will react when the bike is moving. The behavior states for the target are the same as the position behaviors. And of course, you can pick up the target and move it around to adjust where your camera looks. Target interpolation, just like position interpolation, determines how quickly the target's position will adjust to the movement of the object it is tied to. Our next item is called Post Effect. This consists of a number of presets that change things like color saturation, contrast, and tint, altering the overall look you get from the camera. Color tint allows you to put a filter over the camera lens in the color of your choosing. Exposure allows you to adjust the camera's exposure, just like a real camera. Low numbers will result in a darker image. The higher number, the brighter it gets. Our last advanced camera option is Depth of Field. This is another property that simulates real-world camera lenses. The depth of field of a camera lens refers to how much of the image will be in focus. Selecting this will take you to another menu with a few options. The first checkbox simply decides if the camera will have depth of field or not. Unchecked, everything your camera sees will be in focus. Next we pick the focus target. This determines where the camera sets its focal distance. With rider selected, the rider will always be in focus. Set it to object and you can pick any object in the world to be your focal point. Finally, you can select custom value. With custom value, you can set a distance to be your focal point. So for example, if you set it to 10 meters, all items that are 10 meters away from the camera will be in focus. The other two sliders are near and far blur. Near blur determines where the blur starts between the focal point and the camera. Far determines where the blur starts past the focal point. Once we are done with advanced camera settings, we can back out to the game camera's properties menu. Here we have two more options. Selecting Reset to Defaults will reset anything you may have changed about the game camera to its default setting. Select Show Visualization Always, and some of the visual cues that are normally only visible when the camera is selected will always be visible in the editor, even when you're not working with the camera. When you test or play the track, however, they will still not be visible.